Welcome to Neuroscience Part 2. In Part 1, what we did was we showed you the deep end or the high point of meditation, where the parietal lobe goes down because the anterior cingulate cortex is starved of information. And when the parietal goes down, meditators get this ecstatic feeling of being one with the universe. And that perception, that altered reality, is given spiritual meaning. And they are the false spiritual meanings which all sorts of meditators from all kinds of religion, including Christianity, taps in. Now, why do meditators do so much of meditation? Why are they led and encouraged mentally to do so much of meditation that they get there? Now, that's what we'll deal with today. Neuroscience Part 2, there is so much bliss and tranquility and addiction that meditators are drawn ultimately to dangerous pantheism and extreme panentheism. It is this which is very dangerous. This worldview is thoroughly dangerous to Christians because it is the opposite. It's the antithesis against Christianity. I will also now, in this video, deal with mindfulness. What about mindfulness? The claim by mindfulness is that it sanitized itself from all the religious beliefs, from the words particularly, but can, changing the words, the Buddhist words, using secular words, and importing Eastern meditation into the secular, into therapy. For school children, does it clearly isolate religion, Buddhism particularly, from mental health? This is where we're going today. So, it's about other neural phenomena for non-dual pantheistic induction. How we are induced into pantheism. Now, in the book called Buddha Pill, there is a part that defines the mantras they use. And what they say is this: curiously, it made no difference repeating the Sanskrit mantra or the word one. All right? The Sanskrit mantra is Om. You can repeat the word Om or one, and Krishnamurti, another Indian spiritual teacher living in the USA and Europe, had already suggested in 1969 that repeating Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola, or Om had the same effect. So, the mantras do not make it Hindu, Buddhist, or Christian. In other words, if you repeat a Christian mantra, Maranatha, it doesn't make it Christian, because you could use Coca-Cola and you get the same effect on the brain. And what are these effects? That's what's important. All right, the first thing that you get more sleep waves in the brain. Now, right now, hopefully, you are in beta wave. Beta is a fast wave, and beta allows you to assess and evaluate. For example, you're listening to me, and right now, you're wondering, am I telling you the truth? You're bringing forth from your memory things to assess me with. So you're in fast wave beta. But as you meditate, you get into alpha waves. These are pre-sleep waves. And I'm sure you have had the experience when you are listening to someone, they're not particularly interesting, you get more alpha waves, and your brain or your mind drifts, right? One moment you're in church, next moment you're drifting off into the beach in Hawaii. That's slower wave alpha. Then you might go into deeper sleep waves, theta, and that's when you are gone. You don't know what's happening. Okay, so, but this drifting is very pleasurable, very tranquil, and so people are drawn by this tranquility. Now, this is a research from Brown's University, and this is what they say of alpha waves. When alpha oscillations are prominent, your sensory inputs tend to be minimized. In other words, you're not attentive. You're minimizing your sensory inputs. Neuroscientists at Brown's University are doing research on how the brain achieves optimal inattention. Your attention is gone. You're optimizing, you're maximizing your inattention. The Brown researchers hope that teaching people how to harness the power to ignore. Now, note those words, the powerful words, the power to ignore, by creating alpha brain state through mindfulness. So what does mindfulness do to you? It brings alpha oscillations, alpha pre-sleep waves, and it gives you optimal inattention and the power to ignore. So if you have problems, disturbing problems, alpha waves allow you to ignore your problems. And that's what mindfulness is about. It allows you the power to ignore. Now, the other thing that happens is this, your amygdala. Now, what's the amygdala? The amygdala is a point at in the brain, at the back, which when it is overactive, for example, if your boss stresses you week after week with no help, with no sympathy, your amygdala gets overactive and you feel depressed. So the amygdala causes depression when it gets overactive. Now, what they did, the researchers did was, they did research where they showed meditators 216 images and tested them. Before they did the meditation, they tested them in response to 216 images. After 8 weeks of training in meditation, and after a lapse of 3 weeks, they tested them with these images again. And what they found was the frightening images were not as frightening as before. But the delightful images were not as delightful as before. The amygdala is so calmed that it is sedated. So if you were stressed, highly stressed, and you did meditation, true enough, your amygdala calms down, you regain your composure, you feel better. But if you thought that you would do more of this stuff to get a lift in your life, it doesn't really happen, because the amygdala is overcalmed, and in this case, 3 weeks after meditation, the delightful is not as delightful as before. Now, the other thing that happens is endogenous dopamine. Endogenous dopamine is secreted by your own, dopamine secreted by your own brain. Okay? And it causes addiction. And it gives visualization, enhanced visualization. So in relation to addiction, this 65% increase in dopamine secreted by your own brain causes addiction to meditation. And that's why, in addition to bliss and tranquility, there is addiction. So meditators tend to meditate and do more meditation. And dopamine causes heightened sensory imagery. So many meditators, especially the ones that are in more of the spiritual realm, can see a lot more things than normal people. For example, energy can be seen as light and electricity, for example. So these things make Eastern meditation rather exciting, tranquil, bliss, addiction, and it brings the meditator into greater and deeper and longer meditation. And in part 1 of neuroscience, it gets the meditator to a point where in meditation, the anterior cingulate cortex shuts down, the parietal goes down, and they get this one with the universe. And that is sold to meditators of all religion, including Christianity, that it is their unity, their oneness with God. Now, the question is, what about mindfulness? Mindfulness uses the same techniques. It encourages one to follow their breath. Okay? In Zen meditation, I followed my breath. So, can the neural phenomena be eliminated it occurs in Eastern meditation. Can it be eliminated? By not using the Buddhist language, the terms, but using secular language, can it effectively make meditation, which is now mindfulness, secular and stripped of religion? That's where we're going. Okay. Jon Kabat-Zinn, Dr. Jon Kabat-Zinn, he is attributed as the founder of mindfulness. And this is in his own words. For a number of years in the late 1970s, Larry Rosenberg and I taught back-to-back evening classes in the church in Harvard Square. He would teach Vipassana meditation, a Buddhist practice of mindfulness, and I followed with mindful Hatha yoga. So Dr. Zinn was a teacher of mindful Hatha yoga. And there are other accounts of him in Wikipedia. Kabat-Zinn was a student of Buddhist teachers such as Thich Nhat Hanh. Now this is Thich Nhat Hanh, a renowned Zen master. And another Zen master, Sung San. And Zinn was a founder member of the Cambridge Zen Center. His practice of yoga, Hatha yoga, and studies with Buddhist teachers led him to integrate their teachings with those of science. So he was a psychologist, so he integrated Hatha yoga and Zen with science and came up with mindfulness. Now, this is a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. He said, "We do not have to look for God. We do not have to look for our ultimate dimension, or nirvana, because we are nirvana, we are God." So what he's suggesting is that in Eastern meditation, in Zen, you get in connection, or you come to the realization that you are God. In other words, in their pantheistic belief, you come to realize and feel that your oneness with the universe is so unitive. Your consciousness makes everything God, including yourself and all others. Now, what is the ultimate goal of Zen? It's called Satori. Now, what is Satori? It's transcendence of everyday cognition to achieve a direct experience of reality in its totality. Reality in its totality. The reality that they are suggesting is not like as we feel it, that you and I are different, that's your chair and this is my chair, right? This is where things are different. What they're suggesting is, in Zen, the highest state of Satori, everything is one. So if there are 200 of us here, 200, when in meditation, reaching Satori, we are all one. One with everything in the universe. The flowers, the trees, the air, the sun. Okay? Now, the question then they ask, they suggest is, what are the obstacles preventing us from feeling this wonderful feeling? And this is what they say. It's logical analysis and rationality. Our logical mind and our rationality suppress our ability to feel that oneness. Okay, so rationality and logical thoughts are the enemy, the obstacles, okay? And what they want to do in Zen is to dissolve, to do away with these artificial structures. These artificial structures, logic and rationality, are corrupting. That's what they're saying. So Zen actually wants to put away logic, rationality, because they are artificial and they are corrupting. So when they are successful in putting aside these obstacles, what happens? A new world is unfolded. And the confusion of a dualistic trained mind disappears. In other words, they're suggesting that we, which differentiate between good and evil, between you and I, between this so-called unity, are dualistic trained. We've grown up training ourselves that there's a big difference between you and I, and so forth. Right? That this is the obstacle and this disappears. And then it's Satori. And what is the ultimate objective of Hatha Yoga? It's something called Samadhi. All right, let's read these words and you will see the same drift, right? The same direction of Satori and Samadhi are very similar. Although human consciousness is subject to relativity and dual experience, Samadhi is the state in which experience is whole, infinite, and single. The experience of our human consciousness is dual. In other words, you and I, we are differentiated. Things are differentiated. Your chair, my chair. But in Samadhi, the state is that which is experienced is whole, infinite, and single. Oneness. Okay? It's the same as Satori. All right. Then it says, Samadhi may be attained through deep, continuous, and correct meditation. In this state, concentrate on this. In this state, three aspects. Meditator, act of meditation, the object of meditation known as God are finally united. Just as the waves melts into the sea, so too the human soul becomes one with the Supreme Spirit. So what are they saying? The meditator, the act of meditation, and the object of meditation, which is God, which is this oneness, are finally united. This is Samadhi. And what they're suggesting is that each of us are like waves in the sea. You're a wave, she's a wave, I'm a wave, but we are all seawater. And seawater is God. And so we are all God. Right? But this, as I'm talking to you, it seems like it's just words. But Samadhi is that state which is achieved through deep meditation. When things happen in the brain, which deceives the mind and alters the mind to feel this, to sense this as reality. That's why it's dangerous. That's why it's spiritually dangerous, because this is the polar opposite of Christianity. Okay? The things are not God. God is the creator of these things. These things are the handiwork of God. They're the evidence of God. A completely different perspective. Now, Samadhi. This is from Hatha Yoga or Yogapedia. There are 8 limbs of Hatha Yoga, and Samadhi is the 8th limb. All right. Now, this is different from 8 steps. Steps are when you take one step after another, and they are distinct steps. But limbs are different. All right. This is what they call them, the limbs, the 8 limbs of Hatha Yoga. Imagine this palm of my hand. There are well, conceive it as 6 limbs, 5 fingers and my palm as the 6th limb. In Hatha Yoga, some of the limbs are ethical behavior, spiritual practice, physical poses, breath control, turning our senses away from external influence to within, concentration. So these are some of the limbs of Hatha Yoga. But the 7th limb is meditation and the 8th limb is samadhi. But when we talk about limbs, the palm is whole as a whole. This limb here is connected to, this is the entirety of yoga. You can't do samadhi without this. And you can't have samadhi without this. Okay? So they act together in yoga to bring one to the ultimate samadhi. They are related. In other words, when one does yoga, one can't say, I'm only doing physical poses, or I'm only doing breath, I'm only doing ethics. Because they all act together to bring the limbs together as a hand. And samadhi is the 8th limb. So, modern postural yoga, they say, I'm only stretching. All right? And stretching is just physical. No, you are doing physical poses. There is spiritual practice. For example, there is concentration. There is breath control. You're turning your senses away from the outside to your inside. These are spiritual practices. So when one claims to do only modern postural yoga, it is untrue because the entire process is in unity. Samadhi depends on those limbs. And without those limbs, there is no samadhi. So if you say you are not doing samadhi or meditation, and you're doing only the limbs, it's not true. Because the limbs actually are part of samadhi. So, Kabat-Zinn taught Hatha Yoga and studied meditation with renowned Buddhist and Zen Buddhist masters. Now, here is a quote, a very stark, extreme quote from yoga, from people who have arrived at samadhi. Let's just read it, all right? Both yoga and Buddhist meditators experience oneness, which they arrive at by inference. Why by inference? Because as the mind alters, as that altered reality happens in the brain and deceives the mind, there is an inference from the altered reality, from that sense of altered reality because of brain malfunction, to suggest an altered reality. So it's by inference. As the sensing of their I amness. When one is in a moment, the highest law of reality and also the lowest of being. So in one moment, you are God, the highest of reality, I am, and the lowest of being. At one moment, both God and you are one. And that is the depth of spiritual deception to a Christian. So, we know, and the East knows this very well, Eastern meditation and all the sensory phenomena is to launch the meditator into divinity. That's what it does. And so, the West has ignored that and taken and claimed to have taken only the physical. Okay, now let's take a look at India, the home of yoga. Indian culture, religion, education, philosophy, worldwide worldview, politics are all highly integrated, like a jigsaw puzzle. Yeah, their culture is very traditional. Now, as we look at these aspects of India, it's Eastern, it's hierarchical, it's enlightenment. Namaste is their greeting. And Namaste, the greeting is, it says this, it means this: I honor the inner divine in you. And you say that back to me. In other words, we're both asserting that we all have inner divinity, all right, from birth. And their religion is Hinduism, Buddhism, which encompasses all that. Their solution to life, the sufferings of life, is detachment. And yoga is part of that process, and it's about the divinity of all humanity. Education is wisdom, philosophy is enlightenment, divinity of humanity, worldview is cosmic and universal, and their politics is compassion, unity of people, of all religion, and yet, contradictorily, it's very hierarchical. All right? But that's India. Okay? Now, as you look at their aspects of highly integrated tradition, where is mental health? And that's where mindfulness is taking it. Taking Hatha Yoga and Zen into mental health. Where is mental health in all that? Mental health is in detachment from suffering, in yoga, using yoga, okay? But this detachment and yoga is transcendental. It's to launch the meditator into the spiritual. It's not mental health. So what's happened is something which is transcendental, used to launch one into the spiritual, is actually negated by the West. And what is put in place is transformation, mindfulness, and mental health. Is this possible? All right? Why is something that is meant to launch one through altering the brain, through altering the mind, through altering reality, launching one into another realm, used in a very secular way? Is that possible? So I want to introduce you to Milarepa. He is the meditator of old. All right? And it is said of him that he goes into meditation for weeks and months, in deep meditation, to the point that he needs to be bathed and fed. If you had stress and you went to Milarepa and you said, Milarepa, I have stress, my boss is cruel, what will he do for you? He will just say, come into deep meditation with me. He needs to be cared for, to be fed, to be washed. He is of no worldly good. He is good in their terms because he is in another realm. They claim to be the divine. Now, meditators at large are detached, they're antisocial, they are recluses. When I was a young man in my country, there were many, and they did not attract me at all. But now, the West has sanitized them, romanticized them, and westernized them. When I was a young man in the 18 in London, now I rejected this when I was in my home country. But when I was in London, meditation was the high point of society. The Beatles were doing it with Maharishi, transcendental meditation. And they came up with songs, right? The celebrities were doing it, and there were multitude of books in English on meditation. And that's where I picked it up at 18. Whilst I had rejected it when I was growing up, I picked it up because it was packaged differently. It was packaged in such attractive terms. Now, this is from Deepak Chopra, a guru of the New Age, and they suggest on their website a process. Okay, this is only one of the slides. I'm going to run 3 slides of their process to teach people how to get into that oneness. All right. Now, first step is meditation, and these words are taken from the small script. In meditation, they're suggesting this: meditate on your oneness, the consciousness deep within of your higher state. So here immediately is the suggestion that everyone has a higher state, and you are to tap into it through meditation. Conscious actions. Act out this consciousness in your everyday life. So this consciousness that's already in you from birth is not something that is distant from you. It is an everyday thing. You are that oneness, and that oneness is in everything that you do in the day. See your own oneness. Express your oneness to yourself. I am the universe. I am the totality. Okay? So you act out and you live out that you are at one with the universe in everything you do. And then they talk about seeing the oneness in everything. I can see God in everyone. Now, if you can see God in everyone, then you are also God. So this suggestion, this process of acting out your oneness, and your oneness is in everything and in all your actions and in everyone, and therefore you are also that oneness, which is God. And then Namaste. Now, Namaste, I had covered it in just a moment ago. I honor the divine in you. It is an assertion, continuous in their culture, of greeting, but honoring the divine of the divinity of each other. And Om. God and every man is one. That's the meaning of Om. Already one. Something you cannot escape. In other words, if I meditate and I discover my inner divinity, that I am God, right? But you're not meditating and you have not discovered this God in you, but we are still one. And this is how seductive this thought is. And then finally, love, right? Love is the oneness of everyone, of everything, of all faiths. There is no exclusion. Everything is one. And everything is true. And if everything is true, then nothing is true. So this is where they lead you, finally, to a so-called love, which embraces everything and all faiths. This is leading us to a unity of all faiths. And that's why yoga now, in its 5th World Yoga, International Yoga, promoted by the United Nations and India, is claimed to have united the world. This is, and united all faiths. Now, Jon Kabat-Zinn, his mindfulness samadhi is expressed in his audio program, Mindfulness for Beginners, in 2006. And this is what he said in that audio program. There is no place to go. And this is that state of mindfulness, which is the object of mindfulness, okay? There is no place to go. Nothing to attain. It's realizing you are already here. So there's no place else to go. What happens now is what matters. The future we want is here now. We are already in it. Now, having heard about Deepak Chopra's process, about the ultimate of Hatha Yoga Samadhi and Zen, that oneness is the realization of infinity. When the parietal goes down, all right, there is no time, there is that just one moment, but that moment is everything. And time stands still. That is Samadhi. That's Satori. But here, Kabat-Zinn says virtually the same things, but without using the word Satori, without using Samadhi, without using those religious terms. He expresses it in secular terms, but it means identically the same thing. Why? Because it's neural phenomena that happens in the mind, and the mind interprets it and feels it, and it is that feeling, that experience which we use words to express. And words expressed in Hinduism, in yoga. The different words are expressed in Buddhist terms and Zen terms, and different words, secular words, are expressing the same experience in secular terms. So, we are not talking about words here, that by changing Buddhist terms, Zen for example, or yoga terms, and secularizing it, that it can keep religion or spiritual meaning out of mindfulness. It's not possible. And here it is. For beginners. So what is mindfulness? This is from Berkeley, UC Berkeley. Mindfulness also involves acceptance, meaning that we pay attention to our thoughts and feelings without judging them, without believing, for instance, that there is a right or wrong. In other words, there's no right or wrong. There's no right or wrong way to think or feel of a given moment. When we practice mindfulness, our thoughts tune into what we are sensing. So, in mindfulness, you just receive those thoughts. It's not right, it's not wrong. There is no need to believe in it. There's no need to judge it. It's just bare attention, awareness. That's what they're suggesting. All right? Now, this is so much in line with Brown's University research that mindfulness, the alpha waves, causes optimal inattention and the power to ignore. With the alpha waves, the tranquility and the power to ignore, the thoughts arise. It is what it is. There's no right or wrong. And that's how you perceive it. But it's inattention. It's ignoring. Okay? Now, there's a psychiatrist, David Brendel. He's very concerned with this process. He said, some people use mindfulness strategies to avoid critical thinking. Avoidance. They taught mindfulness. People are taught mindfulness. But they use it because of the sensing, because of what's happening in the mind, to avoid critical thinking. I've worked with clients who, instead of rationally thinking through a career challenge or ethical dilemma, what's right, what's wrong, they have to confront it. They don't want to think ethically to differentiate what's right and wrong. They prefer to disconnect from their challenges and retreat into a meditative mindset. So, not only those sleep waves, the ACC, which is that part of the brain concerned with the will and differentiating right from wrong, that part in meditation goes down. In Yoga Nidra, blood flows reduces to the frontal lobe. And the whole process of mantra and breath is to negate all incoming data to focus on basically nothing. That process takes the frontal lobe offline. And with the frontal lobe offline, you cannot make ethical choices. You refuse to make ethical choices. And this is what happens. All right? It makes people passive and accepting. Now, the default mode network. Now, scientists say, and this is probably true, people who are depressed, they think and ruminate on the bad thoughts at high speeds, repeatedly, and therefore they are in depression. And in meditation, the default mode network is stopped, is slowed. So, depressed people recover. Now that's acceptable, that's accepted, that's true. But here is a scientist who is very concerned with that process because negative thoughts are stopped, but positive thoughts, happy thoughts, joyful thoughts may also be lost. And this is what they said. In another psychological science paper, an author team led by Brunel found that when participants physically discarded a representation of their thoughts, such as writing it down on a piece of paper and then tossing it in the trash, they tended to use them less in their decision making afterwards, mentally discarding them as well. This finding suggests that techniques involved in mindfulness treatments can backfire, at least for some people and for some situations, particularly those in which positive thoughts are present. So you may have positive, helpful thoughts, joyful thoughts. They may also be lost in mindfulness. Okay, researchers in University of California, there is increased false memory. It's susceptibility after mindfulness meditation. False memory. Things that didn't happen are taken as if it happened. So, a lot of people are interested in mindfulness because it's growing rapidly. And scientists have looked at it, some scientists have looked at it and conducted a meta-analysis. And this is a report in JAMA. They said this meta-analysis examined 47 randomized control trials of mindfulness meditation programs, which included 3,515 participants. They found meditation programs resulted only in small to moderate reductions in anxiety, depression, and pain. It is not as effective as is told by the media. In Buddha Pill, which is a book people should read, 2 psychologists looked at meditation, and they had this to say about the lack of meta-analysis. No meta-analysis on the studies that focused on how people became more altruistic, more empathic as a result of mindfulness. The database search found 4,000 articles, but there were no random allocation to an experimental and control group, and end up, from the 4,000, they could only find 30 that they could rely on. Of the 30, they lacked proper control groups. They also neglected to check people's expectations about the efficacy of meditation or the training in their active control condition, when there was one. And they came, these people who wrote, these 2 who wrote Buddha Pill, came to the conclusion. They said, with hindsight, I now acknowledge. They say this because they were in favor of meditation. And when they started to write about meditation, they were wanting to write the title as From Monster to Buddha, because meditation would transform monsters into Buddha. But finally, after the research, they changed the title of the book to Buddha Pill, because pills sometimes work and sometimes don't. Okay? So they said, I now acknowledge, after the research, that old-fashioned behavioral strategies can do wonders. Basically, if you want to make people more empathetic and compassionate, having them engage in behaviors where they actively help others may be better than meditating and saying goodwill mantras. Furthermore, there are other psychological strategies, such as rewarding cooperative rather than competitive behavior, that work. Okay, so why are psychologists so excited about mindfulness? Okay? In psychology, there's a term, it is what it is. In other words, your thoughts. It is what it is. There's no right, no wrong. And they want this, what it is, to bring the meditator to this state where, say, you've broken your back, okay? You're not mobile, you may be paralyzed. You come to a state where you have to either accept it, and if you accept it, perhaps make a change for the positive, or you resign yourself unhappily to that state. So the first thing is to find acceptance. And from acceptance, maybe change or keep to an unhappy resignation of that state. So it is what it is, draws people into accepting. And when one can meditate and get to it is what it is, then psychology gets people to that state, all right? It is what it is as a first step. Now, in Buddhism, in meditation, there is neural detachment. All right? Now, how does this happen? Well, it happens in all the processes that I've described. But this is a Buddhist psychologist who took up Buddhism's view of detachment and expressed it this way. The good, the people who are good, renounce attachment for everything. In other words, you renunciate. You are free of everything. The virtuous do not prattle with a yearning for pleasure. The wise show no elation or depression when touched by happiness or sorrow. So they are in detachment. You are so detached that you're not attached even to your detachment. All right? You are untouched by happiness or sorrow. So this meditative state is what psychologists are so interested in, to bring people into accept that this is what it is. There's no right, no wrong, right? And so that is the Buddhist mindset, the passive Buddhist mindset. And Buddha Pill talked about this. It said this: so with mindfulness-based interventions, the aim is not to change your thoughts, but your global beliefs about thoughts. Essentially, you're expected to stop believing that your thoughts are necessarily true or important. So the thoughts are neither true nor false. They are what they are. They are unimportant. And that is the global belief of mindfulness. And then they talked about Buddhist philosophy. This is where the Buddhist philosophy really kicks in. Your thoughts are mere mental events, just thoughts, nothing more. And they don't necessarily warrant any action. All you're aiming to do is to be aware. So, mindfulness brings you into Buddhist philosophy without using Buddhist terms, because that sense of detachment is in the brain and in the mind. So, what is most deceptive in this whole meditative process is when the parietal goes down. When the parietal goes down, you feel at one with the universe. Your body shape disappears. You are the universe, and the universe is you. And this is described by Dr. Andrew Newberg. Okay, we've covered this. Now, this mental state it can't be taught by words. You have to meditate to make sense. When you meditate and the experience, make sense of those words. And this is what scientists say in their research. Let's read it very carefully. Meditators and behavioral scientists notice a deepening of their intellectual understanding of the statements of more advanced practitioners. In other words, Eastern gurus. This is in 1977 by Walsh, Ramdas, and so forth. It thus appears that intellectual understanding in this area demands an experiential basis, and that what was incomprehensible, this oneness, which to you, a lot of you listening to me, is incomprehensible. It was incomprehensible at one stage, but after meditation may subsequently become understandable. Once an individual has experienced some of the meditative process. And the meditative process brings brain alteration and altered reality to the mind. So, what is being said here is that this sense of oneness that used in language, in Buddhist language, right, in Zen language, although you may remove them and secularize the language and develop something called mindfulness, the transmission is neural. In other words, once you do breath or mantra, and in mindfulness they do breath, they get the same feelings. So you can't negate by just sanitizing the terms. So Buddhism, Hatha Yoga, Zen has come into secular society, or is coming into secular society through mindfulness. So, and remember this, okay? This is the summary. The most deceptive phenomena is when the parietal goes down. And when the parietal goes down, in meditation, in deep meditation, the anterior cingulate cortex, the will, the seat of your will. In meditation M, it actually goes down. The ACC goes down, your will goes down. And Columbia University says, when your ACC, your will, is disconnected from reality, once it's disconnected, you are successfully hypnotized. You are open to suggestion, whatever that suggestion may be. And that suggestion in meditation, in Hinduism, is being one with the universe. In Zen, Satori, it's one with the universe. And in Christianity, when they're doing the Eastern style meditation, when their parietal goes down, when their will goes down, the suggestion is that they are one with God. But this is sold to as a method. In other words, if you really know Christ, if you have shared in His joy, you've shared in His death, in His resurrection, He is in your life, you will be so thrilled, so at ease, at peace, so assured that you won't look for these methods. But for the ones that may be backslidden, may be nominal, they are dried up, what is sold to them is, it doesn't matter. It's not prayer, it's not faith, it's not true biblical meditation. Just meditate breath. Just meditate mantra. These are the sure ways of getting you in touch with God. And that is false because it is hypnotic. It depends on the will being down. It depends on the ACC being down. See, God wants us to believe in Him when our will and our reality is up. Okay? This is true belief. But if our will and our reality are disconnected, when they are down, deactivated, we can't possibly believe in the way that God wants us to believe when our will and our reality are surrendered, are up. It is in the absence of our will and reality that hypnotism comes in as a suggestion. And that is not biblically believed as we should, as expressed in the Bible. So all that you've heard today is in my website, meditationmindyourbrain.com or mindfulofchrist.com. You may find me on YouTube and on Audioverse. So I hope to see you again. We're going into part 2 of this series of meditation, mind, and spirituality. I'll see you.